President and Chief Operating Officer of Bryce Weiner Enterprises and the Black Business School. Thanks for joining us today. What's today? Wednesday. This Wednesday afternoon. I'm very happy to be here. Things are extremely busy on our side of the house, but we're joined by a couple of special guests today. One, we're here with the head librarian of the New Jersey Public Library System, Doran
Exactly. Hello, everyone. I'm reading books today.
Yeah, Doran over looking like chief librarian and everything. But Doran is actually, she runs, well, I technically run Great Black Speakers, but she does all the work. Her and a guy named Early. So she will be running Great Black Speakers and already does, and does marketing for Bryce Weiner Enterprises, the Black Business School, the Digital Underground. She's been helping with the conference, all of that stuff. She decided to join us today live and in person. So it's a great thing to actually see. Along with her is a new friend of ours. We were talking offline. I cannot wait for this interview. And actually, before I go even further, Bryce, I just put the link so you can share with your audience, on Twitter. But we're here with Bryce Weiner, and Bryce is the creator. Is that a good word? The creator of the Tao Network.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, he's creator, CEO. I don't know how you feel about the CEO title. I listened to you speak. It seems like you're a distributor of everything.
Well, CEO of a brand new company. In fact, our SEC filing is going out today. It's Alt Market, which is a new exchange in the cryptocurrency space, and creator of Tao Network, which is a blockchain network similar to Bitcoin.
Okay, perfect. So you created your own blockchain that's similar to Bitcoin. So let's just talk about all the cool things that you're doing in the space. Let's just lay that out first so people know that you're the bomb, you know the hell you're talking about. And then we'll go back and get some backstory in terms of how you got to this point.
All right. Our most recent claim to fame is, of course, we're representing the old dirty bastard estate to create a new cryptocurrency bearing his likeness and name that we're going to open up for sale to the public and his fans. And the proceeds of that sale are going to go towards funding the career of his son, Young Dirty. And we also have a similar arrangement with Money B and Digital Underground of Humpty Dance fame. And Young Hump, who is the next generation of that same group, is going to be fundraising using the Digital Underground brand and likenesses in order to on a cryptocurrency similarly. So in order to properly execute these, and we're launching our own exchange in order to do all this. So the cryptocurrencies will reside on the blockchain that we created and then be traded on the exchange that we're launching. And I've been in the blockchain space in public since about 2013. So I'm pretty long in the tooth in the blockchain space. I've launched more cryptocurrencies than probably anyone else on the planet would probably admit to. And as of this point, I'm the most regulated developer in the world. I have more regulations with which I have to comply than pretty much anyone else on the planet.
Why is that?
Because of the way that we've chosen to do this. In order to represent these brands and to protect the brands, we have to be able to say certain things like we are good actors. We're not, one of these crazy money grab ICO things that are fly by night like everybody else. And that takes a certain amount of integrity.
Right.
You can't buy integrity. And people have tried. And unfortunately, it's the choices you make that determine the path that you're able to follow in the future. And we have chosen very, very carefully over the last 5 years who our friends are and, quite frankly, who our enemies are. And it's what has enabled us to get to the point where we can represent names like.
So do you think that the integrity was integral to who you are as a person? I mean, obviously you have integrity, but do you also think that it has to do with the type of clients that you have, like being in the music community, but also being in a Black community, like the kind of integrity and how you're presenting information and how you're offering brands and different artists an opportunity to make money.
Well, and that's totally valid. And I'm not going to mince words. I'm the white guy. And I'm the white guy saying, hey, I can make you lots of money if you let me. I mean, this is the same old pitch, right?
Right.
Your integrity comes from who you are and the people who recommend you. It's these, even in the cryptocurrency space, we talk about trustless a lot. And then the next breath, we talk about identity and webs of trust. And identity and who you are and the people whom you know and the people who recommend you as a good business actor and as someone who can be trusted is important as anything else. And without that segue, without that integrity, we couldn't sit at the table across from the people that we do and say the things that we do. I mean, it would be, the Black community in music has seen all of this before. You can bring them a bunch of shit, excuse my language, and believe it. I mean, quite frankly, and we don't even try. We've never tried. And as I was saying off camera, 2 of our 5 board of directors are Black. And one of them is from the tech and law community, and the other one is from the music community. And without, we're not fake. It's not a matter, to be honest with you, it's not really a matter of color at that point, because real recognizes real. And not bring this to the table and not be real and not be completely upfront and trustworthy and have all of the regulations and all of the lawyers and everything else behind you in order to present this and be taken seriously, because most other people in the space are just nonsense. I mean, and everybody knows it's nonsense.
Right. And that's great. And I want to talk more about that. And, I was just over here thinking, like, how can you not trust someone with that dope ass picture of Jimi Hendrix in the background?
Well, Leon Hendrix is actually a friend of ours.
Really? Okay.
No, absolutely. And like, for instance, the Jimi Hendrix estate is under contest between, I believe it's his daughter and his brother. And who's right? I don't know. I like Leon personally.
Yeah.
And the things that he's done with the brand have made Jimmy the icon that he is. For instance, the picture over my shoulder, and that iconography. And this is very important, actually, to what we're doing with ODB, for instance. We're taking that brand and we're taking that image and we're carrying that legacy forward to a brand new generation and generations that haven't been introduced to it yet. And that kind of thing is very powerful. And you wonder where all of these old acts are. That, why aren't they being mass marketed to entirely new generations? And the reason is because the estates are all under contest.
Yeah.
And we're hoping that we can kind of break that up a little bit and grease the wheels a bit in order to help those things along so everybody can continue to enjoy these icons.
So, that's my main question is, you speak about, the things that you are starting. Can you inform the audience of your vision? So what is your ultimate goal that you're trying to accomplish with all of this stuff in the blockchain?
I mean, wow, what a question. I don't think anyone's ever asked that.
Really? No one's asked you what the big picture is? What are you making all these paint strokes for? What is it for? Where are we going? What masterpiece are you making here?
Someone on my Twitter feed said it best, and I wish I could give them credit with their name directly, but they know who they are if they're watching. And I would have to say that it's the domestication of money. Our money has been like really wild and out of our control, and it's been like this crazy thing, the province of kings and empires and governments, and we've never had access to it as a people. And having that access, it's almost like taking cows and horses and domesticating them from agrarian use. So it's like the conversion of a hunter-gatherer style economy to an agrarian economy where people can settle down and actively participate and build communities and cities. And in fact, KRS-One said once, why don't we issue our own currencies? Why don't we issue our own money?
Who, by the way, is a speaker with Great Black Speakers Bureau, by the way. He's a wonderful, excellent guy. Go ahead. You're talking the truth.
Right along, no, and this goes right along to what he was attempting to express.
Yeah.
Your brand, if you can establish a monetization of your brand, then who you are and what you do has value. And what's the value of the world if we can all be measured as individuals freely and openly compared to one another? What are the, and it's not, there's a kind of like a Black Mirror sort of dark aspect to that. But unless we look at ourselves in that mirror and take an appreciation of what it is that we truly value in one another, can we actually begin to express it truly and accurately. And I think really a lot of, that's a lot of public discourse. Why not put some money behind it? Why not? And my theory is if everything is monetized, if we monetize the whole world, if your refrigerator is hashing Bitcoins and paying for its own warranty, and your TV is doing the same thing, and your things begin to make money for you instead of you making money to earn things, then money starts to lose meaning. What is money? What is the value of an individual at that point, and how do we measure it and continue society forward when we don't have to, basically cheat each other every day to get ahead?
Yeah, it seems like, much more on a conceptual level about money and worth. Like that's something that I think about often just because of the condition of Black people in America, right? Like our worth literally was less than someone else's. Like that was in our Constitution. That was a common practice in America. It was accepted. It was fact, right? Like worth. And so now when we're talking about how do you build wealth in a community that historically has had lower worth, you start to think about, well, what is value? What is money? What is currency? What does have value? How do you accumulate value? Who says it is valuable? And you realize the entire concept of money is fictional. It's what you say it is. And I think that the most bold thing about cryptocurrency is its opportunity to say, no, if we all say this has value, then it has value. It's actually revolutionary in thought. And I think that's if people could catch that idea, it's worth something because you said it's worth something.
Well, and here's why we started with the music. Well, why I started with the music community, because creative thought, creativity is an inexhaustible natural resource.
Right.
There is as much creativity as there are people on the planet who choose to exert it.
Yeah.
And it might be a limited amount of creative fire in each individual, but collectively together, that fire could create a hurricane of value.
Yeah.
And that's not to be underestimated. And how we do that should be from the perspective of the history of knowing how it can all go wrong, how payola works, how cultural appropriation works.
Mm-hmm.
I've got some friends in the Bronx who are still pissed off about what happened in the 80s to their culture and how little of that value returned to the community.
Right.
Now we have ways where we can monetize these legacy acts and then return value to those communities in very, very real and direct ways, literally the heirs.
Right.
So, we can not only settle things like crazy estate disputes, but also long-held grudges that are very, very real and, quite frankly, very well earned. There are people in the music industry today who remember those times in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And I have spoken with some of them, and I'm not going to name names, but they expressed to me personally how upset they were at that treatment and at the way that their businesses were incentivized to treat artists. And that was really the thing. And there's no excuse for just following orders. However, there are ways to make it right.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of what people see in this project and why we've gotten the support that we have. Because we put to bed a lot of these old grudges in ways where everybody wins.
So let's talk about that a little deeper. So you gave us your overall vision in regards to this concept of domesticating money, right? And you're starting out in the music industry, and you identified a problem in regards to, I guess, the lack of trust and people screwing each other over in the music industry, especially in those types of things. What is Tao doing to help solve that problem specifically on the blockchain?
We built when we first started, this is actually represents a pivot. Okay. And we first approached the project as a smart contract platform based on Bitcoin, not Ethereum, but can do all the things that Ethereum can do with a few extra tweaks. We demonstrated in the first 90 days that we're able to do things like create blockchain-based records of music, and complete with ownership and an acoustic fingerprint, and all of the attendant data, where you could literally identify a song in 5 seconds. And that identity was stored on a blockchain, and you could easily reference it. Now, I mean, we could build an app from that, but who really cares? We're going to market. I mean, what's the market for this? And that was really the problem. The technology was a very easy hurdle because that's kind of what I do. But who would use it and why was a much harder question to answer. And that's when we ran into Peter Rafelson, who was a songwriter. Worked with Madonna and Britney Spears. And he runs a company called DigiRamp. And DigiRamp was a successful rights management. You upload your songs, you can, you get paid for them. It has everything you need to manage contracts and everything. But it never caught on. I have a friend named Danny Anders who also runs ClearTracks. Same kind of system. And the question is, why does rights management not work? And it's not that it doesn't work, but there's no economic incentive for anyone in the entire music industry to use any of it. Right now, there's a company called Music Reports. They're the biggest company in this space as for music rights. Who owns what and why and when did it change and all that stuff. And I went to their offices about 1.5 years ago, and they actually demoed their software for me. They're like, "What do you think you can help do better than this?" And I looked at it and I went, "No, not really. There's nothing really a blockchain adds to this other than creating competition for you. I mean, other than that, you guys have it down." And like, for instance, the thing that was funny was he used Nelly Grills as the example. And apparently Nelly's Grills was one of the most complex rights management exercises in music, because really? 17 different cuts on that. And like Rihanna gets a cut and of like 2% because she howled in it for 30, for half a second. But it's like that. So when we talk about things like rights management and stems, the game is already far more advanced than anything in the blockchain space can provide. And we had to take and then we went to talk to Pandora. And that was when we were like, okay, this is just done. Pandora, we were in a panel in Silicon Valley. It was me and Peter and Kamal, one of my partners. And it was so funny because there were 2 guys from Pandora in the audience, and they stood up and asked us what we could do about payment rails and sorting out accounting problems. And we're like, are you guys, that's a really weird question to ask. Are you from a DSP or a streaming service? They're like, yeah, we're from Pandora. Like, what kind of problems do you have exactly in that realm? Since you're asking, why don't you tell us? What can we do for you?
Right.
And it was really revealing. They actually stated that they have to have 2 different sets of accounting for most songs. Because, for instance, and the example that I use to describe this is Disney's Frozen, that Let It Go.
Yes. The anthem of every 4-year-old around the world.
Now, did they hear that song from the Disney soundtrack version, or did they hear that song from the single release by that artist that came from a record label? And this kind of accounting is very, very specific as to who gets paid. So we didn't even realize that was a problem. And the publishers don't want the record labels to know because they have agreements behind the scenes, and that it's the poker game. I mean, that's just business. Transparency in this instance actually serves nobody. It doesn't serve artists. It doesn't serve the publishers. It doesn't serve the labels. It doesn't serve Pandora. In fact, it kind of greases the wheels of the whole business to make it work so everyone is not at each other's throats. Because if publishers and record labels actually had to go down into the dirt as to who gets what money and why, and quite frankly, they are right now with the new Millennium, the MMA is what it's called. I forget what it stands for. But it's where songwriters are now getting paid and engineers and producers. Like that kind of stuff, that stuff is ridiculous. And the lack of transparency in those angles is what makes the whole business work. And otherwise, the music industry would never make enough money to actually function. You would literally not be able to afford a studio time. If you can't afford to get in a studio, you can't afford to pay for studio equipment, you don't have a career.
So let's talk about that then and the problem you're solving. So it sounds like you made a pivot to this accounting problem, and you called it Rails. Is that correct?
Well, the issue was the monetary flow, and Pandora wanted to talk about payment rails, and payment rails are how money moves through an ecosystem. The rails along which it slides like a train, and everybody takes a slice as the train passes along, like a sushi bar.
Yeah.
Now, what we want to do is change that. And we're going to start with legacy acts because this is the long tail of monetization. They have fans, and fans are where the money comes from. And so, let's serve the fans and create money for them.
Right.
Because all of these artists have these small economies behind them. And that's really where money is made. Nobody really makes a living at streaming. And any artist trying to do that will tell you that. Where they make their money is in merchandising. T-shirts, CDs, the physical things. This is one more piece of that merchandising puzzle. And approaching it from that angle, suddenly now we're able to do things like create branded collectible cryptocurrencies. These are actual officially licensed branded items for the fans that can later then be used for other things. But they have no intrinsic value. If you've ever seen a commercial for the Franklin Mint, and they make these specialty coins, that's what these are. And it's like if the coin bore the likeness of Jimi Hendrix or ODB or Digital Underground. But the utility inherent, and this is like, engineering and economics speak, but because it's a cryptocurrency, it makes it really easy to use, and we call that an inherent utility. So you can use these for things a lot easier than you'd be able to use one of those little tokens from the Franklin Mint. And that increased utility adds a potential to it. So it kind of sounds a little bit like physics. You have utility and potential. And that kind of stuff is what makes the price of cryptocurrencies go up and down. And when we add celebrity into it, if an artist releases an album, if they make a news cycle for doing something great, people are going to hear their name, their brand gets bigger, their brand expands, the value of the brand expands. Therefore, the collectible has the potential to increase in value. Very simple economic, because baseball cards work exactly the same way.
It sounds like stamps to me.
Yeah, exactly. Stamps, baseball cards, collectible coins. It falls exactly. And that's why, quite frankly, I'm going to Washington, D.C. next week to talk to Congress, because we're not like everybody else. We're not doing crazy securities. These are branded collectibles. So before you label everybody as the crazy money grab, hold on a second. Let us explain that we are in fact representing artists and their brand. And we all have permission to do this, and it's very simple to explain. Don't lump us in with them. Mm-hmm. And that and that's literally where the industry is at right now, because nobody can do anything.
I see a few different things, right? So one, like I see it as stamps or that type of collectible, but really to me it's replacing like the album or CD cover, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of people purchase the music. Like I'm just thinking like wouldn't it be kind of cool if you had some type of crypto that looked like that photo you have in the background, or that painting you had in the background? Wouldn't that be kind of awesome to have those things, from a collectible standpoint? I also see an opportunity for like it's kind of like a stamp of approval. Do you guys like see that in terms from a merchandising standpoint? So if you own this asset, you can get first release of a new album coming out, or better seats at a concert, those types of things. Is that where you guys are headed to?
Yes, sir. And that's an excellent segue, because what we call it is, in the cryptocurrency space, we talk about proof of work and proof of stake. What we call that is proof of fan. Because it's on the blockchain, we can tell exactly how long you've been a fan of that band. And you can prove it to anybody else on the planet. So all those, excuse my language again, all that shit talking people do about when they heard what band first ends, because you can literally prove it. And what that enables an artist to do is provide value to those fans that can prove that they have been there the longest. That ability hasn't even existed before. There's a certain element to this where we're helping the artist explore the different creative ways that they can now implement these tokens now that once their fans actually have them. So we're not really trying to put it in a box or trying to tell anybody. We give a lot of examples as to what you might be able to do. But in the end, the music and entertainment industry are the most creative folks in the world. And we're looking forward to partnering with all of our artists in order to see what wonderful stuff we can come up with. We've talked about, parties and exclusive meet and greets and I mean, anything is possible, quite frankly. And in fact, we've had a few people that we prototype everything. None of this. So we prototyped this actually within the XTO network, the Tao Network, where we said, if you own 100,000 Tao tokens, we're going to refer to you as a diamond, and you get special access. And we actually invited one of the diamonds to come down to the Purple Haze offices, meet myself, the team. Money B was there from Digital Underground, and he got to meet them. So we got to sort of.
Wait, hold on. What's Purple Haze? Like, that's the name of your office?
No, Purple Haze actually is
Jimi Hendrix. Yeah, but I didn't know. Oh, okay. I didn't know if you named your office after Jimi Hendrix.
Oh no, they did. Like, no, okay. Purple Haze Properties are actually some of our business partners, and that's why we feature so heavily in our stuff, because that's literally who we work with all the time.
Right, gotcha. Yeah. So this is interesting. So now I'm just thinking about this concept of what Doran was talking about earlier in terms of people assign the value of different things, right?
I wanted to go to that too, yeah.
Yeah, so how does the value of a collectible cryptocurrency, how does it increase for an artist? Is it as the artist blows up that just more people are in demand of that particular crypto asset? Or like, how are you seeing like the value of like this collectible coin increasing in value for an artist?
Well, in the sense of like a baseball card increases in value. There's going to be a limited number of these tokens in circulation at any given time. So, and we've even talked about limited runs. So you could do like one Purple Haze token and then a Voodoo Child token, again, down the Jimi Hendrix branding. Or you could just do a Jimi Hendrix token sort of thing. That multiplicity of branding means that each one is cryptographically unique, and that's where the collectible aspect comes into play. When we offer a set of tokens for sale, there will only be a limited number of those tokens to ever exist in the entire world that will bear that artwork. So like a limited run of CDs or baseball cards. So it's that scarcity that creates the value over time. And if you figure like a legacy act, and this is a little bit different, because for a legacy act, the fan base is already well established. This is just one more merchandising collectible for them to add to their vast collection that they already have. For newer artists, the perspective changes. And we haven't executed any emerging artists yet, just for that reason. there are some arguments that, quite frankly, within regulations that we feel we need to build before we can turn to emerging artists and apply this same technique to them.
Why? What's the unique challenge of emerging artists in terms of a regulatory standpoint?
That it might be considered a security because they may not have delivered on a sufficient fan base in order to say that the value of the token is already established in the fans. So for a legacy act, we can say, you can look around. I mean, I've got a Jimi Hendrix picture on my wall. Obviously, there's a value in his image. We can put, but if you're some small bar band somewhere and you've got 25 fans that follow you religiously, but there's only 25 of them, there's an argument to be made about the legitimacy of being able to fundraise that way and how to eliminate certain fraud and that sort of thing. And we need to be able to explain what it is. We need to walk before we can run, quite frankly. And the legacy acts provide the means to build those arguments so we can help smaller acts later on. So, and we've even told this to some of the legacy acts, like because they've asked us, how are we going to do this? If you'll notice, each legacy act that we're building has an emerging artist attached to it. And they are the heirs of that legacy act.
Right.
So we're already beginning to work in that direction, but we still have to be able to execute on it first to be able to prove that we are doing what we say we are. And that's where we are in history. I mean, that's unavoidable.
It's weird that you just said history, because I was literally going to reference history. I was like, it's like you're modifying a monetary ecosystem of like legacy versus emerging, and it's like you're piggybacking. It's like the big leagues that supports the little leagues or the minor leagues, rather. It's really interesting. The thought I had as you were explaining how you're presenting legacy acts and the commodification of their brand through these coins, I thought about Henry VII, right? So I know this is weird. I know.
Henry VII. And that's why we have a librarian on this interview. Because they can go back and reference all of historical books
here that I have. But what I thought about was, it's really interesting. You ever want to know what's going to happen tomorrow? You read the news yesterday, right? You need to know what happened before. If those who do not know the past are doomed to repeat it, right? And so when you talk about coins and you talk about like what's the value and how does this work, I think about Henry VII, because when he took the throne, right, and there was they created the Tudor Rose, and they joined the York family with the Tudor family on this very fragile claim to the throne by Henry. One of the first things that he did in this war-torn England, right, because all of England was split between the Tudors and the Yorks, either you with my crew or you with my crew, either that. One of the first things he did was he made a coin. And they said that it was the first act of mass marketing in Europe. Like in England, that was the first act of mass marketing, was a coin, because he solidified his position as king, and everyone was able, and he made sure, he was the first one to put his face on the king, his whole face, his bust on the coin in England. And that was a genius move because everyone knew who the king was. They knew what he looked like, and they put it on money. So it's really interesting how you just went back there and did it today, Bryce?
No, that's exactly what we've done. And that's, we use those historical precedents in order to build the legal arguments for what it is that we are doing. And part of the way that we have to establish these networks is very particular in order to say they are currencies or commodities or not securities, or they are securities, quite frankly. And for instance, with Bitcoin, you hear all the time about the 10K pizza, which it comes around every April because that's when it happened. It was the first economic transaction conducted with Bitcoin, and it wasn't for money. The guy said, I have 10,000, I want 2 pizzas. No one knows how much this stuff is worth. I'll send you 10,000 Bitcoin if you give me 2 pizzas. And somebody on the forum responded and sent the guy 2 pizzas for 10,000 BTC. Now, there's actually the BTC Pizza Index these days, which actually denotes the fiat price of those pizzas, which is $86 million, but or $78 million. But the point I'm making is that according to certain very well-tested, few hundred-year-old monetary theories by folks by Ludwig von Mises, and more recently by Jesus de Soto, these are what they are because of these very, very specific tenets of Austrian economics. And it's uncomfortable that they exist. However, they do exist. They are real. People can and have defended them in courts of law. And that kind of perception and that kind of education, quite frankly, you can see it already. Excuse me, I'm going to have to close my Slack here. You can see it already in some of the statements that the SEC and the CFTC have made, very specific. For instance, if you launch these currencies correctly, or if you launch these networks correctly, they become extrajudicial in a sense that they become foreign entities. And as regulated by Article 4, Sections 8 and 10 of the Constitution, the United States federal government cannot mess with any money that isn't its own. So if you can thread the eye, if you can thread the camel through the eye of a needle, you can create these experiences that are unlike anything else on the planet. And we can thank Bitcoin for that example. And that's why Bitcoin can't be shut down by anyone. It really has nothing to do with the technology. It's a real respect for what money is and how money is created in the current system, and then creating it in a completely different way, but still equally valid. And that's the thing that has everybody's heads exploding. Nobody's ever been managed to do that before.
Yeah, it's really fascinating because what you're doing is you're creating freedom, right? If it's not regulated, then it genuinely is free. And we say we live in America. I know I'm going to get like a little challenging here, right? We live in America, the land of the free and home of the brave, which as a person of color and a woman, I can tell you I have a few issues with that statement. But we live in this place that's free, but it's regulated, right? And before we get into like that whole philosophical discussion of, fiscal responsibilities, roles of government, what is the role of government, what is its job, we're having this conversation about freedom outside of all of that. It's freedom. I wrote a note earlier when you were talking about the concept of cryptocurrency, like we're talking about what it is, what it does. And I thought about how it decentralizes power, right? It puts it in your hands and it makes you have that freedom with the money. But what it also does is it eliminates the idea that there's not enough. I think that power, it resides on this idea that there's not enough. You don't have enough resource. You don't have enough food. You don't have a big enough house. You don't have enough for your kids. You don't have enough education. You don't have enough. And what do you need for all of that? You need enough money. And when you take that, there's not enough. No, there's actually enough. Now we're getting into Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That's what actually I wrote, Maslow. We're getting in the hierarchy of needs, and it's self-actualization. Who can you be when the resource is unlimited? Who can you become?
Let's find out. I mean, and why not? If you look at, and this is the point that I've made to, I don't want to call doubters, let's say. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the current system and the trajectory, and why not try something new? Because it's extra legal and semi unregulated. We do have to follow certain rules like money transmitter rules and all that sort of stuff, which we do. But it's not really that hard. You have to pay attention. You have to be, and you can't say certain things. But that's the whole point. If you can act with a little bit of self-control and a little bit of responsibility And those laws that encourage that self-control and that responsibility were created in order to protect consumers from fraud and abuse. So suddenly, complying with regulations is a manner of saying, I want to deliver a good product to you that you can trust and that you can use and will be here for the next few years and isn't some fly-by-night scam. And in that sense, regulatory compliance paves the way for all of this new horizon for creation of value. And when we talk about that, we talk about creation of value. When you monetize something, the value must come from somewhere. And the value that everyone, so I kind of have this theory. I'll just go ahead and talk about it. I call it UBVC, pun intended. Universal Basic Value Creation. Mm-hmm. It's in this, it accepts that Facebook is going to monetize everything that you do and that Twitter is going to monetize everything that you do. So if that's really the way the world is going to go, let's take it to the nth logical conclusion, monetize the data that we all create every single day, walking through a mall, looking at advertisements, looking at signs, hearing things on the radio, monetize all that data, and then create a universal basic value of every human being just because they exist.
Yeah. That is interesting. Yeah.
And you know what? If we can take the sacrifice in privacy for the acknowledgement of existence, I think that says a lot for the economic power that can then be exerted by individuals, because it is that acceptance that, yes, we are in fact the product. And as the product and the consumer, we must be served.
I've been thinking a lot about that concept, right, of value and things like that, especially since today is April 4th, the 50th anniversary of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination, which is not a celebration, but a day of remembrance and of reflection. And as we reflect on it, and I was thinking about how Black people are the only people who've been legislated as people, right? So no one ever said, "Hey, Bryce, hey, white guy, you're a person." You know, no one ever said that, right? You have the right to be a person.
I'm going to qualify that a little bit.
Qualify it.
Taxpayers,
right,
were people. If you didn't own things, you didn't pay taxes, and if you didn't pay taxes, you didn't really have a say in anything. So I'm going to make a rich white man argument, where it was, in fact, rich white men because that's the way they stack the cards. Let's just get it off the table and call it what it is. Poor white people were still as equally marginalized and sent to the front to fight for things that eventually they hoped they would get someday. But they had to, at least they had the opportunity to become taxpayers, whereas Black people weren't even considered an entire person.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you that.
So let's acknowledge that not only there is an imbalance, and there was a much longer road that the Black community had to travel as compared to everybody else, but there was still a road that a lot of folks had to walk.
Right. So we're talking about the right to own property, right? So I would rebuttal and challenge you to say, personhood. Mm-hmm. is not in the act of paying taxes, but in the act of owning.
Okay, and I would say that I would kind of counter a bit with a bit of anarchist philosophy, specifically. Property is theft. So, right. So to own a slave or to own another person or to own the entitlement to someone else's labor is to steal from them.
Right. But I'm saying like owning property, owning things, right? Because even women could not own things. So their personhood had to be legislated, right? And what I'm saying is in this community, your idea, your concept, it really establishes the world as it should be, which is that no person should have to be legislated as a person. That shouldn't have to be written in. There shouldn't be a piece of paper that says, you, by the way, you're a person today. But your concept on its face says that everyone is a person. We don't have to legislate. We don't have to write it in. We don't have to change it. It is.
It's kind of by default. Like if you're participating in the process, you're human. You can't.
You know what? I think I take it a step back even further, and I think that most things are made up, right? So most things that we believe in are made up. So this concept of ownership, one person can view it as theft, one person can view it as a right, but someone made up some artificial terminology or some artificial concept, and their job was to get other people to believe in the same thing. And if you get enough people to believe in something, then it becomes true in the minds of humans, right?
Right.
So I guess it just depends on, what we want to be true, and what we want to make true as a collective in this community. And it actually brought me to a good question that Lynn, shout out to Lynn Mosley, that he has on Facebook. He says, in regards to your what did you call it? Universal basic
value
creation. That's right. Who determines or qualifies that universe? Who determines or qualifies the universal basic value of each human?
That depends on the ways that people creatively monetize the data itself. So I make a joke. I don't know if you watch Adult Swim, but I'm a cartoon addict. I never really grew up in that sense. And they had this funny joke infomercial called Smart Pipe, where it was a spoof on stupid Silicon Valley inventions, but it actually kind of struck on a really good point where everybody poops. And if you can take the poop and analyze it, you can see their dietary information, which would tell you about income, which would tell you about their living conditions, which would tell you about the structure of their communities and the infrastructure around them. Do they even have access to clean water? That sort of basic data is absolutely invaluable, and every single human being creates it just by the very value of using indoor plumbing. So now here suddenly is an incentive to give everyone on the planet indoor plumbing, because then you can actually have the data that nobody else has.
Exactly.
Brand new data is value that is currently left unexplored in the fear of the sacrifice of privacy and how it can be abused. And that's very real, and it needs to be addressed. However, that's almost a solvable problem. And if we can come to terms of it's almost the amount of mutual respect. Like if everybody is going to be participating in this, then nobody would want to abuse it, because eventually they're going to be the ones being abused. It's almost like a nuclear deterrent strategy, where everybody is equal.
Or perfect balance.
Nobody would want to see it abused. Excuse me?
Or perfect balance.
Right. And that's, maybe it's theoretical. I don't know if it would ever be possible, but it's a really interesting idea that's sort of the nth logical conclusion of the trajectory where we're headed, and it would take only a little bit of growing up as a species in order to implement it. And I think we could probably hit that goal too. Like it's really not that far.
I'm glad you.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lawrence.
No, go ahead, Doran. I was gonna say, I love the philosophy discussion that we got into. Actually, we got off the coin, but I can talk about philosophy all day long.
Well, if I could, it matters. And it matters because this technology is really personal. We can do anything we want with it. And what you choose to do with blockchain technology is a reflection of who you are as a person. And that's really uncomfortable for a lot of folks who have created projects that are quite frankly hard. But it is true. And there's going to be more folks like me the longer time goes on. I have a lot of friends, and we all have little tiny projects because we've been waiting for everyone to get all this crap out of their system. Because once they do, we're going to roll out the good stuff. And we've gotten to the point where folks are getting tired of ICOs and the potentials for getting ripped off and the promises that never materialize. So let's give them some stuff that is true and real, and you can meet the folks behind it. They want you to come and meet them, come see them in concert, and participate and interact and create value in entirely new ways, as opposed to just simply stealing from one another. That's just got to end.
Bryce, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter, Bryce Weiner, BryceWeiner, and that's pretty much where I hang out. I don't really do the conference circuit much, or many interviews. But this was an absolute treat. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Yeah, I love talking to you, man. I think Dora does too over there.
Yeah, I had a blast. This is the perfect one to drop me in on.
Well, thank you guys so much.
No, thank you, Bryce. Thanks for spending time with us today. This was really amazing.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So, any websites they need to be aware of? So you have Tao Network. Is that what it is, or?
Well, Tao Network is the blockchain that we're currently building on. The trading symbol is XTO, and you can find it on coinmarketcap.com, and then explore different markets to purchase it there. We're launching our brand new exchange, alt.market. And we've just filed for our SEC 506C fundraising, which, unlike most other exchanges in the space, we're actually explaining what we're going to be doing, which means we can be held accountable for it later. So there's a level of transparency we're establishing just in the very way that we're going into business that we feel, nobody else can even touch at this point. So we're, thanks for that opportunity. It's basically placeholders right now. The market's live, the blockchain is live. You can go and trade it and participate. We've got a very active community on Slack, which you can find on the Tao.network website. And when we try to make news, we try to make it big, so you don't have to pay too close attention.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Bryce, man, thanks so much for your time, and for those watching, thanks for watching us today. If you want to know more about what we're doing, just head over to theblackbusinessschool.com. We have our digital underground products community that many of you are a part of, that is meant to educate and inspire and help individuals who want to learn more about the blockchain space and also invest in the blockchain space also, in terms of providing that financial research component of making sure that happens. So that's why we're bringing you interviews like Bryce. Watch out for the upcoming Jarvis website too. So we're spinning Jarvis off onto its own thing, its own brand, because of the success that you guys have made it so far. So be on the lookout for all of that. So Bryce, thanks so much for your time once again. Doran, thanks for joining us as well. And we'll be in contact soon, everybody. All right, bye-bye.